Welcome in to Cover Crimson. My name is Emily Grace McWhorter, and I join Clint Lamb every week to talk all things Alabama football, and we have a good time doing it. So we have some breaking news, obviously in the last 24 hours. If you are aware of college football in general, if you're an Alabama fan, you are very familiar with the Ryan Grubb hire. And Clint, we're going to kind of break this down from a different angle, talk about what this means for current position groups like the offensive line, the receivers, DeBoer's relationship with Grubb, why that's significant, and a few other angles we want to talk about specifically with Michael Penix Jr. and if Alabama will be able to replicate the success that he had at Washington at Alabama.
I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, this is massive news for Alabama. And really as we continue to talk through it, you discover more benefits. There's really no downside to it. I did mention continuity as being something with like Nick Sheridan, but you keeping Nick Sheridan on the staff, even though we still don't know what that role is going to look like, I think that eliminates some of the issues that you might have with continuity because you got a guy who's familiar and has been around and can help with that transition. So, this is a massive get for Alabama, and it's I feel like it's going to make the offseason a lot more interesting.
I agree. I'm looking forward to some hopeful media opportunities. We have not heard on that front if we'll have an introductory press conference to Ryan Grubb per his arrival in Tuscaloosa. We'll definitely keep you guys updated on that. But as of right now, there's nothing on the book. So hopefully soon we'll get to be down there in Tuscaloosa and get the full, picture of everything and get some comments from Coach DeBoer along with Ryan Grubb about what this means to them. But you touched on Nick Sheridan. So we kind of sung his praises the last show that we did in terms of how he addressed the media and kind of the position that he was put into. Do you have any initial thoughts, Clint, of where he might fit in on the staff? Do you foresee him going back to a tight end role and Brian Ellis moving to an analyst spot, or what are you thinking there?
Yeah, that's kind of where my mind has been at. Now, granted, I don't know anything definitively. Like it could be Nick Sheridan moves to an analyst role.
Yeah.
It could be, it could be a number of things. What we do know is that Jamarcus Shepard isn't going anywhere. Nick Sheridan is not going anywhere. They're both continue to be on the staff. We know, and the reason that you bring those two up specifically, or there was reports about those two specifically last night, was the fact that it was your offensive coordinator and your co-offensive coordinator from this past season. So you got to make sure that everybody's aware, hey, the two guys who are kind of holding that role, from a play calling perspective or, from a title perspective, they're both going to be, sticking around. And Bama says, add Scott Huff. Look, I'm pretty sure that the Seattle Seahawks, I think it was about an hour ago, John Benton, who was the New Orleans Saints offensive line coach with Clint Kubiak, is joining Kubiak in Seattle as their offensive line coach.
Yep.
So that kind of answers the question of, are they going to hang on to Scott Huff? Is he going to stick around? He will not be. Does that guarantee that he's following Ryan Grubb to Alabama and rejoining Kalen DeBoer? Not necessarily, but it is something to at least monitor or note as we're trying to navigate or figure out exactly what this staff is going to look like in 2025.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one note on Nick Sheridan, there was a lot of discussion about how his Twitter account, X account, went private. And I am here to set the record straight on that. That he went private, I want to say, after the Vanderbilt game. So it's been a minute. So that was not in relation to last night. I know there was some speculation about that in terms of if he was going to stay on staff at Alabama. I think that was just, people didn't realize it until now. But his Twitter account went private prior to this all taking place, and it was back early in the season. Obviously, in this day and age, social media does play a role in some things, and you can kind of pick up on some trends if you're monitoring different coaching accounts and things like that. But here to say that was not anything new that took place, and he still does have Alabama football on his header and things like that. So quick programming note there, his account did not go private last night. But you talk about the offensive line with Scott Huff. So Clint, we talked about the offensive line in detail in one of our previous videos, and we kind of broke down that position group. Give a quick synopsis for those watching about, kind of where we landed on them prior to the season ending and what your thoughts were.
I think it's a group that has a lot of potential. I think there's experience there. You're getting 3 starters back with Parker Brailsford, Caden Proctor, and Jaden Roberts. You've got 2 other guys who have ample experience. Cam Dewberry transferred over from Texas A&M. You got Gino Vandemark, who had played quite a bit. I think he's got 10 career starts, whether it be at Michigan State before he transferred over or at Alabama. We filled in for Jaden Roberts a couple of times as far as starting, and also would come in, at both left guard and right guard, sometimes at center. So he's got some versatility. You also got Wilkin Formby, who's a former top 100 recruit. He got a couple of starts this past season at right tackle. Didn't look great in those starts, but I think when he started coming in and platooning down the stretch with Elijah Pritchett, thought he looked a lot better. He's kind of a Kalen DeBoer style of tackle, so I like, what he could potentially bring to the group. And then you got just a lot of options on the interior, former top recruits, true freshmen who are coming in, Michael Carroll, Jackson Lloyd, just across the board. They got a lot of really good options. It's just a matter of figuring out, okay, who's going to go where, who's going to end up starting, who's maybe going to be like a swing tackle or your top tackle off the bench, who's going to be your top interior rotational piece. It's just figuring out kind of how things are going to look on that front. But I think that the offense is going to be set up more to help the offensive line moving forward. So it's not just a matter of guys being older and getting better. It's also based off how things are going to look around the offensive line. I think it's going to look a little bit easier.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one thing that Ryan Grubb brings to the offensive line position is experience. So I want to tell you guys, so when he was at Sioux Falls in 2007, he was an offensive line coach. Eastern Michigan, when he was an assistant, offensive line coach. Fresno State, offensive line coach. So there's a lot of emphasis for him on that position. And I'm curious how we're going to see it evolve. Now, again, as far as coaching changes and the effects of his hiring, we are pretty much completely in the dark, right? There's been nothing definitive said about, for example, Coach Cap offensive line, what his role is going to be, if, Ryan Grubb will coach quarterbacks, offensive line, run game, have a, emphasis there. So keep that in mind as we're talking about all of this. There are going to be some, not ramifications, but a bit of what's the word I'm looking for, Clint? An effect, if you will. Like there's going to be a trend that takes place.
There's going to be an impact.
There's going to be an impact on some position coaches. But I point that out because at all of these places, so I mentioned Sioux Falls, Eastern Michigan, and Fresno State, and then obviously at Washington, he was the offensive coordinator. DeBoer was with him at each of those stops. So that's significant for a few reasons. So what I've learned after being around this staff, specifically with Chuck Morrell, who was a special assistant to Kalen DeBoer last season, he fit a similar pattern of Ryan Grubb of following Kalen DeBoer places. And I asked him about that. I said, that we don't see that very often. What is it about Kalen DeBoer that made you, uproot your family every step of the way? And he said, there is not one other person I would do that for besides Kalen DeBoer. And he clearly has another person like Ryan Grubb who is also willing to do that. And I think that speaks volume about the relationship that him and Kalen DeBoer have. And I think it's interesting. I mean, when he was at Sioux Falls, he stayed with him for 7 years. Another interesting fact about Ryan Grubb is that he was at the 2008 NAIA Strength and Conditioning Coach of the Year. There's going to be some emphasis there. I think Coach Blue already is really highly respected in that aspect. But I think you're also going to get another angle to this offense where this guy's background is in strength and conditioning, offensive line heavy. He's got some run game coordinating experience. He kind of does it all. On top of that, him and Kalen DeBoer have a great relationship, enough for him to keep following him and his family keep moving around.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we seen that where it's like it's not just like one guy where it's like you become besties and then you just, travel the world taking college football over just the two of you. It's like multiple coaches.
Yeah.
That's different. That's unique. And I do think that speaks volumes for Kalen DeBoer. And just, we talked about the importance of him being familiar and comfortable with his staff. Like it's a new environment. It's a new fan base. It's new pressure. The Southeast is way different than anything he had done before. Having a staff you got to get guys who are the right people for the job. Like you got to hire quality candidates, but you also having that familiarity, making him as comfortable as possible really can help with the transition. And, I think there was a lot of factors that led to some of what we saw this past season, but I do think that in year two, that was already going to start paying dividends. And I think adding a guy like Ryan Grubb into the mix, who is kind of, he is that kind of sidekick who's been everywhere with him. That's absolutely huge. Mm-hmm. And I think that those two balance each other out really well. And so I think it's it's not just about how it's going to look on the field and the impact it's going to have on the field, even though it's going to have a massive impact in that area. It's also just two guys who know each other, who are great at kind of tackling game plans together and figuring out how they're going to attack opponents in new creative ways. It's almost, yesterday or last night I mentioned Kirby Smart with Nick Saban, and kind of the way he followed him around a little bit. It's somewhat similar, but it's also like it's the offensive equivalent of when you get Nick Saban and Bill Belichick in a room together and start talking defense. A lot of things can be discovered or found. It's I'm not saying that they're the two greatest of all time like those two, but it's two guys who really know offensive football and have fun creating new wrinkles and stuff that they can throw at defenses. And it's been a huge success everywhere they've been. So I would fully expect to be successful in Tuscaloosa.
So I want to point out Antoine's comment. Have y'all heard that Grubb was more of a hard ass on the players at UW than Coach Clint DeBoer? So I have heard this circulating, and I'm not sure of the validity of this, but I have been hearing whispers that he was definitely more of that presence of, Coach DeBoer. Obviously, we've seen his coaching style, and I think that, as Clint, you mentioned, that he balanced that. So I'm intrigued to see, because we'll get to see firsthand, and we'll notice that pretty quick based on how he speaks to the media, and then hopefully with those practice glimpses that we'll get. But I'm curious, the relationship that they have, and was Coach DeBoer missing that last season? How big of a role did that play, considering Ryan Grubb was his first choice to take to Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, I mean, and I have certainly heard that as well. Good cop, bad cop. And it's like one of the things that Clint DeBoer is really good at doing, whether it be with players, whether it be with players' parents, whether it be with staff members, whether it be with staff members' families, he's really good at building trust. And that can be achieved through, in multiple ways. Nick Saban was really good at that too. And he didn't baby anybody. And I'm not saying Clint DeBoer babies anybody either, but it's kind of a different approach where it's like, you really feel like he's got your best interest at heart. Mm-hmm. And you can go to him and talk to him about things and share how you feel. And it's like, I think that's really what's allowed him to be successful, is that when you can start building that trust factor kind of from top to bottom within your program, I think it affects morale. I think it affects, as far as the camaraderie in the locker room and the relationships there between players. It's like, it's kind of infectious. Ryan Grubb, he's going to earn that trust kind of through the Nick Saban route, where he's a little bit more of quote unquote a hard ass. Mm-hmm. He's going to get on you, but it's for your benefit, or to your benefit for him to do that. And he approaches different guys in different ways. Like, you can't treat everybody the same as far as how you talk to them and discipline them and do all those things. But I think he's got a really good feel for, how to get the best out of players. And a lot of people will point to Seattle and their struggles. And I understand that it felt like there was a lack of commitment to the run game a lot of the time. I think he would have probably dealt with similar problems in Tuscaloosa this past season that he dealt with in Seattle, where it's like the offensive line, for whatever reason, it wasn't that great. Yeah. You couldn't get anything going as far as the run game. Geno Smith, it was like, he's good in some ways, but he's limiting in others. So I don't blame him at all I thought he actually did pretty well. I was surprised that with him only having a year, I was surprised that he got let go after just one season, but it was some philosophical differences between head coach and coordinator. And so they went in their different directions. Alabama's going to benefit from it. Yeah.
I think that we can all agree, from a media standpoint, that this is a good thing for Alabama. I think, as we mentioned in the opening of this, Clint, there's no downsides to this hire. Really, the more you actually look into him, you look into his background, he's checking boxes that people may not even realize is a good thing to check, specifically with that strength and conditioning element, the offensive line experience. I think that you're going to see just tremendous upside. Real quick, before we move on to the quarterback discussion, if there is, the opportunity for Michael Penix Jr. to emerge out of Tuscaloosa with this quarterback battle, where can they find our content and where can they follow us, Clint?
Yeah, you can find us at covercrimson.com. That's where all the message board action is happening, and we continue to kind of put content out over there. Also, if you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. That helps us. Can't even tell you how much that helps us as far as, the growth. And we've seen tremendous growth since we started this back in early August. Mm-hmm. But as we continue on throughout the off season, we're going to continue to bring this kind of content. So we appreciate everybody who's here.
Yeah. And it's only going to get better, especially with this hire. The off season just got a lot more entertaining, and I'm really excited for that. We'll keep you updated here on Cover Crimson, but let's shift our focus to the quarterback room. So we talked ad nauseum, really, this entire, offseason of this quarterback battle. What is it going to look like? Now, I have always kind of had my finger on the pulse of Austin Mack being in the mix, more so, I think, than some people. And I think with this addition of Ryan Grubb, I think that it levels the playing field even more than what Coach DeBoer alluded to at the Senior Bowl. And what are your thoughts really on, you have a few players that, played under Grubb at Washington, now they're Alabama. Do you think that's going to change things when it comes to the quarterback position?
Say that last part again.
Do you think that this will affect, the quarterback battle with Ryan Grubb's addition in Tuscaloosa?
It can. I definitely don't think it hurts Austin Mack. Keelan Russell was going to be dealing with the same thing regardless, which is I'm new and I've been coached by any of y'all yet.
Yeah.
So nothing was going to change there. With Austin Mack, it's like, okay, I have been coached by Ryan Grubb. You know the expectations, you know the approach, you know the things that is going to please him, what's not going to please him. And so, you won't have any of those growing pains as that transition happens with any coach. Ty Simpson, so he's going into year 4 now, and he's had 4 different offensive coordinators. Bill O'Brien, obviously,
Reese.
Tommy Reese. You had Nick Sheridan this past season, and now you got Ryan Grubb. It's a lot of transition for him. Jalen Milroe just got finished dealing with it himself, and so that'll be interesting to see kind of how he continues to evolve. But what I will say is, it's kind of like the relationship and establishing that with Ryan Grubb will, take some time, and that adds another element. But at the same time, the offense, it's kind of like with Nick Saban's defense when he was the head coach, it's his defense. So, it's not like the offense is going to be changing, not even the terminology and everything. It's all going to be the same because it was Kalen DeBoer's system in the first place. So there won't be any sort of transition period there, which is good because typically when you make a coordinator change, it's someone that you don't know. They're bringing in new philosophies, their own thoughts. It's like, Ryan Grubb is just going to be going right back to and adapting to what Kalen DeBoer is already doing. So there won't be much change as far as the players are concerned other than establishing that relationship.
Yeah, and it's an interesting discussion. I see you guys in the chat talking about it because you're also having to factor in, do people stay? Do people go? Keelan Russell specifically. But, Ty Simpson is about to go off. Everybody's about to eat. I think that it's going to be so interesting, especially with the receivers, because Ryan Grubb loves a passing offense, a passing attack. That was super obvious during his time at Washington and what he tried to bring to Seattle. So I want to give you guys some numbers. So Michael Penix Jr., he was at Indiana, and then he joined Kalen DeBoer at Washington. And I think we all know how Grubb and DeBoer really, revolutionized Washington's offense from, the year prior to them arriving. So under these two in 2022, they led the nation in passing yards, first downs per game, and third down percentage. And they were second in total offense behind Tennessee. In 2021, to put that in perspective, Washington finished 73rd in total offense. So here's my question, Clint. Alabama finished 42nd in total offense this past season. So that's per CFBstats.com. What 6 SEC teams finished ahead of them?
As far as passing
Total
offense?
offense.
Total offense.
Yeah. And I want you guys in the chat to be thinking about this. I think 1 or 2 might stump you, but there's 6 SEC teams that finished ahead of Alabama in total offense this season. And I want to look at this number this time in a year and see if Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer can do what they did at Washington and completely revolutionize it.
Yeah, I think, that's LSU, I believe. Garrett Nussmeier, definitely was putting up stats. Ole Miss, have to think Texas, Tennessee. They did.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I was kind of wondering.
So you've got 4 of them. You're missing. Did you say Ole Miss?
Yes, I did say Ole Miss.
So you're missing 2.
Oh, this is tough.
One of them, once I say, you'll be like, oh, wait, yeah, that makes sense. And one of them is going to be like, okay. But there's 2 left.
South Carolina really wasn't one that they didn't win that way. So Florida, no. Georgia didn't, did they?
Nope. Not South Carolina.
Not Florida?
Not Florida.
Definitely not Mississippi State.
Not Mississippi State.
Vanderbilt, surely not. No, Missouri. No, Missouri was pretty up and down. Injured quarterback, so I wouldn't put them up there. All right, you got to tell me.
Auburn.
Okay, that is not shocking, but it's shocking when you hear it.
Arkansas.
Okay, then that's really interesting too.
So Auburn was at 28. So remember, Alabama finished 42nd in total offense. Auburn was at 28, LSU 25, Texas 21, Tennessee 15, Arkansas 10, Ole Miss 2.
Arkansas was 10, huh?
Yes.
That's interesting.
It's interesting.
And I mean, that's the Bobby Petrino effect. This
Right.
is why play callers matter, guys. I
Yeah.
mean, when you got the right play caller, a lot takes care of itself. Because I mean, in places like in the SEC, most teams are going to have talent. When you've got a play caller who can elevate that talent, especially at a place like Alabama or Georgia or Texas, where it's like you got premier talent. Look what Chip Kelly did for Ohio State. Now he's gone, but he had a ton of toys to work with, and he did a phenomenal job of executing. I mean, granted, it wasn't always consistent. You had ugly performances, aka Michigan, but for the most part, I mean, when it mattered, great play calling, and this is the Ryan Grubb type of impact that he can have on Alabama's offense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought that was an interesting statistic, and I want to check back in about a year and see if there has been improvement like we saw at Washington with this group. But then I want to talk about Michael Penix, because I've heard a lot of discussion about how, well, Alabama doesn't have a Michael Penix, right? Right now, everything is up in the air with the quarterback battle. And I want to kind of remind people that Washington did not start out with what Michael Penix turned into. So here are some statistics from his last year at Indiana to his next year at Washington. So he jumped from 87 completions, and I want you to give me a number of how many completions you think he had at his last year at Washington. No, excuse me, his first year at Washington.
So how many what?
How many completions? So at Indiana, he had 87 completions, and in that next year, what did he jump to?
I mean, he played a lot more. So he tore his ACL
in 2020
and 2018. So he tore it twice. So Indiana. Okay, so he only played in what a handful of games his last season.
Yep.
But at Washington, he was the full-time starter for, I think, almost every game. I want to say it was like north of 350.
362.
Okay, and he threw for what, 4,500 plus yards and like 30 plus touchdowns. So, yeah, I mean, the guy, that's and granted, he played almost triple the amount of games, but at the same time, I mean,
when you look at the upside of what someone like Michael Penix evolved into, especially in Ryan Grubb's offense, it's insane. He, in both seasons at Washington, he had over 10 games with 300 plus yards. So I think what you're going to see is Ryan Grubb has the ability to really mold these quarterbacks specifically into that passing game. And I want to ask you, Clint, where do you feel like that's going to benefit the most next season? We talked about this with, Ty Simpson as the potential quarterback, but now Ryan Grubb, where do you see the most upside when it comes to the receivers?
Well, I think the offense in general is going to be more efficient, more effective, more consistent, all the things. It was a big issue where it's like one of the problems that I had with it was either Nick Sheridan or it was Jalen Milroe kind of, checking into certain things, and maybe it wasn't Sheridan sometimes, but I think it was Sheridan. But it was like where he wouldn't have any sort of commitment to the run game. You would see success on a particular drive running the football, and he even might run it 2 or 3 times in a row. Now, granted, there was tons of drives where it's like you run, you have success, and then you immediately get away from it. But if they had any sort of traditional run play called that only got 1 or 2 yards or anything like that, it's like, okay, just don't expect to see another run from the running backs the rest of this drive. It's unless they get down there near the goal line, like it's not going to happen. And that's something that I think Ryan Grubb, that was a huge problem that everybody had with him with the Seahawks. But the way that they utilized the run game through the running backs and they use the passing game to play off of that is going to be something that you're going to see an offense that's a lot more on schedule. You won't see as many second and longs. You won't see as many third and mediums and third and longs, and it should put the offense in a position where the entire playbook remains open, and that is going to allow your receivers to benefit not only from increased number of pass attempts, a pretty steep increase, if I had to guess, based off of who you're going to, regardless who ends up starting at quarterback and who, the fact that your offensive coordinator loves to throw the football around. But it's also like you will see more success and more efficiency. Like when you go and look at the targets and everything for certain offenses in the past, Alabama offenses, maybe the targets wouldn't have been as high as you would have thought that it would have been, but it was like there the run game was taking pressure off of the passing game where they can maximize those target opportunities because they were spreading the football around a bunch. Like when you had the wideouts and you had 4 different guys you were trying to feed the football. I mean, in 2018, you had Irv Smith Jr. as well at tight end. So you had 5 different guys that you were trying to get the football to, and you were also throwing the football to Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris and everybody else. So it's like, no guy necessarily got like just absurd target numbers, but everybody was very efficient with their targets that they got. I think that's where the receivers are really going to benefit in this offense.
Yeah. Do you, after thinking back to the Senior Bowl comments made by Coach DeBoer about Ryan Grubb, does your impression of those change at all now that Ryan Grubb is now the new offensive coordinator?
What do you mean?
I guess, do you make more of those comments about how if Ryan Grubb ever needs him, he's there? Do you kind of, what is your take on that looking back?
That did throw me for a big loop. I mean, I thought just with the way he was talking about him going through his process, I said it was either one or two things. It was either he had wanted to be in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And so, I thought, okay, maybe he's checking to make sure there's no other coordinator opportunities on that level. Or it was, we don't have an actual opening. We're not going to move off of Nick Sheridan. We would love to have him as an analyst. You're getting paid, a lot of money to go away from Seattle, so you can afford to go be an analyst, still get paid handsomely, still have a huge part in the game planning. And in a year's time, things might change. Like I thought, okay, it's probably one of those two situations based off of those comments. I feel like this happened too quick, where it's almost like now I no longer feel that way, where it was almost like he was like, I'm letting him go through his process, and his process is we're closing pretty quick. So, that was his way of saying he couldn't come out and say, you'll find out soon enough. But I think in a lot of ways, that's kind of what he was telling us.
Yeah. It's always fun to look back at like the last few comments made during a situation like this, because, for us, we only know what's, being reported, and we try to be very upfront with you guys, and we don't, add into the speculations or things like that. And so it's kind of curious and like, what did you really mean by that, Coach DeBoer? Were things already in motion? What kind of was going through their head? Austin Mack. What did Antoine say there?
Yeah, he said Austin Mack will be as close to Penix as anyone. If it was Ty, then it would have already been Ty. I've talked a lot about why I didn't think it was Ty. And I don't think it had anything to do really with Ty. I just think that, people don't understand. Jalen Milroe, everybody in that locker, they loved him. He was a popular guy, and he had success. It wasn't like there was inconsistency problems against certain teams. You had issues, but it wasn't like he was just he was terrible every week. He'd go out there and he'd put up games like he did against Georgia and against LSU. Yeah. It was just really a consistency problem. And so you're hoping as a teammate, it's like, I love this guy. That with more time, more consistency will come. And I guarantee you an NFL team is going to be banking on that same thing. And it never happened. Mm-hmm. But, with Ty and everything, I think going into this year, Ty, when Kalen DeBoer was first hired, I remember I got in a lot of trouble because in my mind, it's like a new head coach. I didn't think Jalen Milroe fit the system. I thought the system would be a lot more important to Kalen DeBoer because it's what he's built his entire success off of. And so I'm thinking, okay, if I don't think Jalen Milroe fits that necessarily in the spring, I wouldn't be surprised if they opened up a quarterback competition. I do think Ty Simpson's probably a better fit. And so I said in some depth chart projections early on, I put Jalen Milroe as an order status with Ty Simpson. And that upset a lot of people, rightfully so. Like once I thought about it, it's like this guy finished number 6 in the Heisman race. Mm-hmm. He had a tremendous amount of success in 2023. He finished, pretty strong, obviously, against Georgia and Michigan. Maybe it wasn't his best football, but they're elite defenses, so it wasn't surprising. But, I just was like, I shouldn't have done that, even though I was trying to portray that, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if Ty Simpson did end up being the guy because he was a better fit schematically. But it was very quick that I backed off of that, because of, the correct criticism that I got from people, but also the way Kalen DeBoer kind of came out very early on. It was just like, yeah, he didn't say this is our guy, but he pretty much all of his actions were pointing to Jalen Milroe is our dude.
Yes.
And so I think from that, it kind of told you this is a new head coach. He comes in, he's new. He wants to keep the team together. He's got the team leaders and the team captains. Milroe got really close with him very quickly. Expecting him to come off of Jalen Milroe, it just, I understand people say that he should have done it. There's more to it than it just, being a Madden where you're pulling somebody off of out of a starting job and putting somebody else in. It's there's emotions involved. There's other people involved, and for whatever reason, it never happened. But I don't think that's an indication. I'm not saying Ty's going to start because of this. I just don't think people should say, well, he couldn't beat out Jalen Milroe. I didn't think Jalen Milroe was very good. That must mean Ty Simpson's not very good. I really think that if that is your approach, you are going to be quite surprised at how effective Ty Simpson could potentially be in this offense.
What are your thoughts on Keelan Russell? Because we're getting some discussion in the chat about it. Do you feel like he has the potential to rise to the occasion over the next, couple months of spring and summer?
Man, this is tough because there's a reason he's the highest rated player to ever come to Alabama.
Right.
From a recruiting perspective, the talent is just, it's incredible. And I have a very hard time because I try not to get too carried away with freshmen. I did it a couple of years ago with Justice Haynes, and I paid dearly for that. Last year, I told myself, don't do it. You're not going to do it with Ryan Williams. I don't care. And then, a couple of weeks, probably around early July, mid-July, you start hearing rumblings. This cat, he's going to be involved. And so you start looking, you're like, man, if you're hearing that, okay, we'll start hyping him up a little bit. And then he faltered a little bit down the stretch, but for the most part, he lived up to that hype and probably exceeded expectations. I just, I kind of want to continue to take that route where it's like, instead of putting just absurd expectations on Keelan Russell right here out the gate, let's give him an opportunity to get on campus and kind of show what he's capable of, show that he's ready. And if he is, I think he's a little thin. It would benefit him between now and August to put on 10, 15 pounds if he's able to, put it on the right way. But, I think from a mental standpoint, I think from as far as just the makeup in general, he works extremely hard. He picks up on things from what I've heard, and he kind of has the skill set that could really thrive in this Clint DeBoer offense. I wouldn't be shocked if he was the starter by any means, but I just think right now Alabama's in a position where you don't have to assume that, because I have a much stronger belief in Ty Simpson than maybe some other people.
I want to get to AK's comment here, and he says, do y'all think, and he's talking about Grubb, he's just going to be one and done at Bama if we have the success we hope we have this year, and what does that mean for our future if he's really that difference maker? It's a great question.
Well, here's what I'll say about that. If they have a lot of success to the point where Ohio State did with Chip Kelly, would Ohio State fans trade that? No, they won a national championship. So I understand the question as far as like, man, it would sure be nice if we could get some continuity. 5 offensive coordinators in 5 years would be, a good heavens. Let's do something here. But it's like, I couldn't tell you. What I do know is that more than likely, based off of the way that he was, the expectations that he had in Seattle, the fact that really when you talk about 10 wins, you talk about some of the good as far as what they did offensively, the fact that he still was let go after a year. Will he have like another NFL opportunity in 2026? I don't know. I think it would probably be a multi-year thing on that front. I think the next worry that you probably have to have is him getting a head coaching job. So that would be probably the biggest concern. And he was in the running to replace Kalen DeBoer at Washington and didn't end up getting it. But I think if he has success at Alabama this year, it is possible that some people will be courting him. But I even if that ends up happening, the ball really needs to get rolling in this Kalen DeBoer era. And if Ryan Grubb can help kickstart that, even if it's for a year, I think that would greatly benefit the program.
All right, Clint, that is going to do it for us on Cover Crimson. Make sure you go to covercrimson.com. You can get $25 off your annual subscription right now. So make sure you go check that out. We've got message boards. We talk all about this in depth. Clint is great about answering questions, and he gives you a full in-depth answer. He does not, take any shortcuts when it comes to answering questions from Alabama fans, and that is something that you can't really get anywhere else. We appreciate him for that. We also have some other great contributors on our site. We'd love for you to join us there. Follow us on social media. And listen, me and Clint, we're going to have a little bit of a scheduling change. So we have really enjoyed going live with you guys and starting off our days with you. So we're going to be moving to Wednesdays and Fridays at 9:30 a.m. Central. So we love that time slot, but we're thinking that Wednesdays and Fridays might be a little bit better for you guys. So as always, we appreciate your discussion in the chat and giving us your questions and things like that. But Clint, do you have any thoughts before we hit the road?
No, and I love the fact that we're switching it up. I mean, we went on Monday this week because of the, Ryan Grubb news. Yeah. So it was like last week on Friday, we're like, you know what? We kind of like this Wednesday, Friday setup. Let's keep doing that. And then, of course, yesterday that news breaks, and we're like, you know what? We got to hop on here and at least talk a little bit. So this was a rare, moving forward, I guess, a rare Monday episode. But Wednesdays and Fridays is where you're going to be able to find us. EG, I appreciate you as always.
Of course. All right, you guys have a great day, and we'll see you next time.